as Annie Ackerman said, when you think that it couldn't get any harder, then you have the Betrayal episode, which is commonly known as the backwards episode, because it's an episode done backwards. Now, some shows and sitcoms do kind of do the thing of like, oh, we start off with this scene, how did we end up here? And the whole episode is a story from what took place before that opening scene. Well, in this episode, they went all out and not only basically did each scene backwards. Well, they didn't do it backwards. They just had, like, in order, they did basically scene Z, scene Y, scenes X, all the way back to scene A is the very last scene. But of course, they also, acted like they literally did this backwards. Like they did, like the episode when you play it on DVD starts off with, the Castle Rock graphic and, the credits are rolling before they even start the first scene as if it was a closing scene. And of course, back in the opening, in the last scene, they play the opening credits. And of course, the last credit that's shown is, of course, the Seinfeld logo. Before they do, the even forward backstory of it. So this one is a tricky one to talk about, trying to talk about the whole episode backwards, but I'm going to give it a shot. And of course, on the DVD, they do actually have a way you can actually play the backward episode forwards. I mean, I do agree it's not quite as goofy going forwards because of the pre, this happened before all this stuff, and they go back even further than they had to. So it doesn't quite work when it goes forwards, but it's definitely harder to view when it goes backwards. The idea for this episode actually came from a play called The Betrayal, written by Harold Pinter, which of course, they used the name as one of the guest characters on the show, Pinter, as kind of a tribute to the playwright. So let's start off by saying that this episode starts with everyone coming into to Monk's, and everyone's miserable except for Kramer. Kramer's in a happy-go-lucky mood. The rest of them are not, in a good mood. George and Jerry are upset with each other. George is saying, "You can stuff your sorries in a sack." And Jerry's like, I still don't understand where you got that from. And Elaine, meanwhile, has a bandage on her nose. Something very nasty must have happened there. But of course, apparently they just got back from Sue Ellen Mishke's wedding in India. But of course, Kramer wants to hear all about it when he gets back from the bathroom, even though wants to talk about it. So let's, of course, talk about it backwards. So basically, Sue Ellen Mishke came out of the wedding wanting to break it off because she just found out that apparently Elaine, a couple years earlier, did once sleep with the groom, with her fiance, Pinter. And again, the wedding is out in India. Jerry and George, meanwhile, are bickering because George was about to go out with one of Jerry's old girlfriends, Nina, but then Jerry slept with her. And why is that? We'll find out that in a little bit. But of course, then Nina basically had to choose between George or Jerry, and she picked neither. And she said, if you didn't want either of us, then why did you come out to India? She's like, free trip. Because Elaine got them all free tickets, and the only reason why she had an extra ticket is because Kramer didn't come. Because Kramer had some business back in New York to take care of. So Jerry and George are arguing over, the fact that who's going to get Nina. Of course, they're upset with each other. And then George had these boots on that he refused to change into, but Nina, of course, called them what they were. That made George look taller. So there's that. And then, of course, Sue Ellen Mishke got mad at Elaine, who apparently Elaine was the maid of honor. But then we find out the bandage came from because Elaine had got her nose pierced in India, and Sue Ellen ripped that nose ring out. So obviously, I'm sure that pretty much hurts, ripping a nose ring out. I don't know how it feels. I don't have one. I don't ever plan on getting one. Ouch. And that all started because earlier, before that, we had the wedding ceremony start to begin. But of course, George has found out that Jerry slept with Nina because, and of course, Jerry apparently had thought that George was acting funny on the way out. So I guess they figure out a way to open up Elaine's vault by giving her schnapps. And Elaine got so drunk the night before, which what led to her pierce her own nose. And she revealed that George knew that Jerry slept with Nina. And on the plane ride over, basically, Jerry was catching on that George was acting funny. And of course, he was saying stuff like, Jerry Seinfeld's a funny guy! Yeah, he was just furious at him. Elaine swore to Nina that she didn't tell George, but George got her to, open up her vault by giving her schnapps back in New York, which led to a lot of tension between them. Now, Kramer, meanwhile, he was off on his own this episode. So, he was the first time we see Kramer outside of Monk's in the opening scene, in the closing scene, he was getting hit in the face with a snowball that apparently was as solid as a rock. And he basically told him and his friend FDR, Franklin Delano Rose. Who do we find the name? Franklin Delano. Come on, what is it? FDR in this episode. His real name was. Come on, almost there. Where is it? Come on. Really didn't want to do this. Franklin Delano Romanowski. Okay, Franklin Delano Romanowski is saying that they're even. Well, then, we even see Kramer even went to Newman for some help, because I guess he wanted Newman's birthday wish. But Newman lied to him and did give him his birthday wish, because when he went to blow out his candles, he wished for a hot girlfriend, and he got the girlfriend. And of course, Kramer found out earlier when he kept going back and forth between Jerry and FDR before Jerry and them left for India, that Newman lied because Newman, I guess, was on a hot streak, had his last 5 birthday wishes came true. So he did promise Newman, Kramer would give Newman would give Kramer his birthday wish if Kramer gave him the next 50. Because he needs to reverse a birthday wish that it was bothering him. That one of his Franklin Delano Romanowski. Well, I said his name before. I can't remember what it is now. FDR had made just a few days earlier. But then, of course, Newman lies when he sees a hot model. He wishes for a hot girlfriend. Instead, he gets a girlfriend. And of course, Jerry, meanwhile, also before they left for the trip. And of course, this is after Elaine had blabbed to George about sleeping with Nina. The reason why Jerry and Nina finally slept together was because they were just having coffee at his apartment, having a great conversation, and apparently they always had great conversations, but nothing just ever led to anything sexually until they had an awkward pause. Bam! And of course, Elaine accidentally walked in on Jerry whenever Nina was coming out of the bedroom also. So Elaine, of course, caught on without Jerry even saying anything. And of course, they had a couple other goofy little things. Like they had Jerry open up the drawer, see there was milk and Fruit Loops in his drawer. Like, what's this all about? And it says 10 minutes earlier, showing Kramer, trying to escape from Jerry's apartment while Jerry was in the bedroom, not knowing at the time Nina was there too. And Kramer just scooped everything into the drawer, basically, stuff like that. Or there was a sequence when Newman went back and forth. He had a lollipop in his hand, the first scene there was no lollipop. The next scene there was a little more lollipops. The lollipop was growing back as kept saying 10 minutes later, this and that, this and that. So Newman, of course, Kramer, of course, was going back and forth because he found out that his friend FDR wanted him... Ooh, thunder. FDR wanted him to drop dead. And at the end of the episode, or the beginning of the forward version, FDR had wished for Kramer to drop dead. Why is that the case, though? We'll get to that in just a second. But meanwhile, of course, Elaine had taken everybody to India, though, because she received an invitation to Sue Ellen Mischke's wedding 1 week before the wedding was supposed to take place. So Elaine always showed up to annoy her because she didn't think Sue Ellen wanted Elaine to be there. Turns out, though, she was happy to be there because nobody else wanted to go to India for a wedding, which, you know, it's hot. There's nowhere to go to the bathroom. George didn't want to go to the bathroom to impress Nina and his new shoes and whatnot. Even her groom, Pinter, of course, who Elaine had slept with a few years, you know, earlier, his parents didn't even want to go either, and the reason why they were in India is because that's Pinter's heritage. And of course, you know, Elaine did get the invitation at the very, very end of the it's confusing to explain. Had gotten the invitation at the end of the episode when they played it all backwards, and of course she even read the name and it said Pinter, whatever his last name was. So I wonder and she said, I once dated a Peter, whatever his last name was. Wonder if they're related. And George had ran into Nina, and then Jerry had talked about setting George up with Nina. Of course, that is before all that other commotion happened. And of course, we do see the birthday scene where FDR, before he blew out the candles, gave Kramer like the stink eye and then blew the candles out. So then, of course, after all that, and even, of course, the first scene actually shown at the very end of the episode, which was the forward version, would be like the first scene before we had the pre-episode stuff, whatever you want to call it, is Elaine getting the invitation for Sue Mischke's wedding. And we actually do see the last thing they show, of course, is the Seinfeld logo before it fades. And then, of course, with the closing credits, there's 2 flashback scenes. The first one is to 2 years earlier, where Jerry and Nina were on a date, having a great conversation. And truth be told, I'll be honest, Nina was definitely one of the more attractive girlfriends Jerry ever had. And I thought they were great at making conversation. They were great at talking with each other. The problem though was there was no awkward pauses, and there was nothing that was leading to them getting past. It was just the conversations. So it felt more like a friendship rather than, you know, a romance. And then, of course, you know, she's getting ready to leave. George comes in with Susan. So Susan's making like a flashback appearance, which apparently Heidi Sweetberg had already cut her hair a little bit short, so she actually had to wear a wig in this episode. And she said, you can stuff your sorries in a sack. And George said that plenty of times throughout the rest of this episode, to which Jerry kept wondering, where on earth did you hear that from? Which we found out here from Susan. And then we also have Elaine walk in. At the time, she was dating Pinter. And of course, they even go funnier by going back even further back in time to 11 years earlier, when Jerry first moved into the building and he first met Kramer. Which, of course, they had like a gag, you know, obviously because they originally wanted to call Kramer Kessler. But Kramer and Jerry had said, oh, you're Kessler, right? Oh, no, Kramer. And then he'd offered Jerry to help him move his boxes in, but then he said, no, thanks, I don't need really help. He goes, but I have pizza. He goes, oh, I can't take that from you. And then Jerry's like, why not? We're neighbors. What's mine is yours. And Kramer's like, really? Which, of course, led to the whole the backstory as to why Kramer just walks into Jerry's apartment whenever he wants. Because Jerry told him, what's mine is yours. And that's how the backwards episode began, or ended, whatever you want to say. Confusing episode to review. It was great, don't get me wrong. Like, the sets and everything was great. You know, it was a little more like, you know, it was a little more like a different feel. Like, they even said, too, you know, they, like, experimented with, like, a lot of things. I guess Andy Ackman also even jokingly made a joke about, oh, yeah, we had an elephant in this. And that seriously, and there was one of the, like, the exterior shots, they did show an elephant walking, you know, through India or whatnot. But yeah, it was tricky to shoot, definitely tricky to review, but I definitely would say it is one of the better episodes, especially in season 9 for sure. Like I said, it was based off of Harold Pinter's play The Betrayal, which of course featured, you know, an affair with a woman and someone else, which kind of was the first story that was written for this was definitely you know, the story with Jerry, Nina, and George. And of course, it was, okay, how do we get to this big chaotic moment? And of course, well, in India, India wedding is pretty chaotic, so that's when they brought in that, and of course, who would be the one person that you would hate to go out of the way for, and of course, that's when they brought in Sue Ellen Mishke for it all. Oh yeah, and of course, I also forgot to mention too, but in that flashback scene where we see Nina, George, and Susan from 2 years earlier, and of course Elaine Pinter, we also see a Kramer came in with a snowball, and he's like, I'm going to pull a joke on my friend FDR and throw a snowball at the back of his head, which is why FDR 2 years later had his birthday wishes was for Kramer to drop dead. Got to mention that in there. Even though, of course, the storyline-wise, it was from Susan George got from the origins of the line, "You can stuff your sorries in a sack, mister," is used throughout, is a reference from the episode, 1970 Odd Couple episode called Strike Up the Band or Else. Of course, also, when when Kramer was telling Jerry and George he'd been getting dirty looks from FDR, they asked him if it was the crooked eye or the stink eye, and of course, that was referenced back to the Van Buren Boys episode. In Mad About You, the apartment, being 1992, it is established that Kramer was initially subleasing his apartment from Paul Buckman, and that Paul had been living in the apartment when he met and dated Jamie, and Paul knew Jerry because he had asked Kramer about him. But in the flashbacks episode, of course, it shows that, which of course would take place technically earlier than when Kramer had moved in. It shows that Kramer was already living there where Jerry moved in. So it's a little bit of a continuity error from this Mad About You thing. I'm not sure. Apparently also a working title for this was The Cake Parties. Don't get why it would have been called that. This, of course, was Heidi Sweetberg's final episode, and of course the only episode she played after Susan's death, besides her appearance in the painting in the Foundation. And this is also, of course, the only episode when any of the four cast members get drunk and hungover, which, of course, was Elaine. But, yep, that's a Betrayal. Again, good episode, definitely tricky, though, to review. I believe next is, I think, The Apology, which is a decent episode. Not my one of my favorites, but it was a decent episode. We'll talk about that episode though next. So guys, what are your thoughts on? Wait, is it The Apology or what is it? Let me double check here. It is The Apology. So we'll talk about that next in the next video. And of course, we also see David Puddy once again. Make sure you guys leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. Be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video. Subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody.